The first time Thando Mthembu understood the difference between power and desire. She was 43 years old and standing in the rain outside a gallery opening in Rosebank, watching a man 20 years her junior laugh at something her daughter had whispered in his ear. His name was Siyanda Ndilavu. He was 29, which meant he'd been a child when she'd mortgaged her mother's house to launch her first tech startup. He had the kind of presence that didn't demand attention so much as quietly commandeer it, the way certain predators move through tall grass. Lean and elegant in a charcoal suit that hadn't come cheap, with eyes that seemed to see through pretense the way her algorithms saw through market inefficiencies. When he smiled at her daughter Zinl, something in Thando's chest tightened with a feeling she refused to name. She told herself it was maternal concern. Zinl was 24, brilliant in her own right with a master's degree from Oxford and a position at a prestigious consulting firm, but still young enough to mistake intensity for depth. Siyanda was an architect, recently returned from a fellowship in Copenhagen, and he spoke about sustainable design with the kind of passion that made people lean closer. Thando had noticed this at dinner the week before, when Zinl had brought him home for the first time, how everyone at the table had gradually oriented toward him like flowers toward light. That dinner had been when Thando first felt it, the thing she would spend the next 6 months denying. He had asked her about her work, not with the usual mix of awe and calculation she received from young men trying to network their way into her sphere, but with genuine curiosity about the ethical implications of the surveillance systems her company designed. He had challenged her, gently, about data privacy in emerging markets. And when she defended her position, citing economic development and security concerns, he had nodded slowly and said something that would echo in her mind for weeks afterward. He had said, "I think you're right about the outcomes, but I wonder if you ever let yourself imagine what it costs you personally to be that certain about everything." The table had gone quiet. Zinl had laughed nervously. Thando had smiled the smile she used in board meetings when someone had overstepped, and changed the subject. But later, alone in her bedroom in the Westcliff mansion that had been photographed for Architectural Digest, she had stood at the window looking out over the glittering sprawl of Johannesburg and felt something crack open inside her chest. Now, 2 months later, Siyanda was engaged to her daughter. The ring had been her grandmother's, reset in a modern design that Thando had to admit showed exquisite taste. Zinl was radiantly happy, and Thando was standing in the rain outside a gallery, watching them through the window, feeling like a woman who had spent 20 years building an empire only to discover she'd been constructing her own prison. She should go inside. She was expected. The gallery owner was a friend. The artist was someone whose work Thando collected, and her absence would be noted. But she stood there another moment, rain soaking through her Tom Ford jacket, watching Siyanda's hand rest on the small of her daughter's back with casual possession, and wondered what it would feel like to be touched that way. To be touched at all, by hands that wanted her rather than what she could provide. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant. "Minister Kgosi called again, says it's urgent." Thando felt her jaw tighten. Naledi Kgosi. The name alone was enough to spike her blood pressure. Minister of Digital Infrastructure and Telecommunications, former CEO of the country's largest telecommunications company, and once, a lifetime ago, the woman who had shared Thando's bed and nearly convinced her that vulnerability wasn't the same thing as weakness. That had been 15 years ago, before Naledi had pivoted from business to politics, before their breakup had been vicious enough to leave scars that still ached in certain weather. Now they were rivals in every sense that mattered. Naledi's department controlled the contracts that would determine whether Thando's latest venture, a comprehensive smart city project for 3 major municipalities, would move forward or die in regulatory hell. The contract was worth 8 billion rand over 10 years. It would position Thando's company, Sentinel Technologies, as the dominant player in South Africa's digital infrastructure for a generation. It would also give Naledi Kgosi enormous leverage over her, which was precisely why Thando had spent 6 months cultivating relationships with every other stakeholder in the decision-making process. She deleted the message without responding and finally walked into the gallery. The warmth hit her first, then the noise. The usual crowd of Johannesburg's aspirational elite, holding wine glasses and discussing art they didn't understand with the kind of performative intellectualism that made Thando's skin itch. She saw Zinl immediately, her daughter's natural grace making everyone around her seem slightly awkward by comparison. And beside her, Siyanda, who looked up at exactly the moment Thando entered and held her gaze for a beat too long. She felt it like a physical touch. The recognition in his eyes, as though he saw something in her that she'd been careful to keep hidden. Then Zinl turned, and her face lit up with uncomplicated joy. "Mama, I was worried you wouldn't make it." Thando crossed the gallery, accepted her daughter's embrace, and allowed Siyanda to kiss her cheek in greeting. His lips were warm. His cologne was something with cedar and bergamot that would linger on her skin for hours. When he pulled back, his eyes held hers again, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of the same dangerous awareness that was currently making her heart race. "Your mother always makes it," he said quietly, even when she'd rather be anywhere else. It was the kind of comment that could be taken as observation or accusation, praise or criticism. Zinl laughed and said something about Thando's notorious work ethic, but Thando barely heard it. She was too focused on the way Siyanda was looking at her, as though he could see straight through the armor of her Cartier jewelry and her perfectly cut suit to the woman underneath who hadn't been touched with desire in so long, she'd almost forgotten what it felt like to want. "If you're feeling this too," she thought, "then we're both in more trouble than either of us can afford. And if you'd share this moment with someone who might understand, you'd know you're not alone in recognizing how dangerous it is when someone sees you clearly." The evening proceeded with excruciating slowness. Thando made conversation with people whose names she immediately forgot, praised artwork she hadn't really looked at, and tried not to notice how often her eyes found Siyanda across the room. He was good with people, she observed. Not in the aggressive networking way of the young professionals who treated every social gathering like a battlefield, but with a genuine warmth that seemed to draw confidences. She watched him speak to an older woman about her late husband's art collection, saw the way his attention never wavered, how he seemed to actually listen rather than simply wait for his turn to talk. It was intoxicating, that quality. In Thando's world, everyone wanted something. Every conversation was transactional, every relationship strategic. But Siyanda seemed to move through the world with a different set of rules, as though human connection wasn't a means to an end, but an end in itself. "He's special, isn't he?" Thando turned to find her daughter beside her, eyes soft with love. "He is," Thando said, and meant it, and hated herself for how much she meant it. "I know it's fast," Zinl continued, "but when you know, right?" Thando had never known anything of the sort. She had married Zinl's father because it had made strategic sense, because he came from a good family and had political connections that had helped her navigate the early days of building her business. They had divorced when Zinl was 7, amicably enough, and he had remarried within a year. Thando had never remarried. She had never even come close. After Naledi, after the wreckage of that relationship, She had decided that certain kinds of intensity were incompatible with the life she was building. But she smiled at her daughter and said, "When you know, you know." Later, much later, after she had escaped the gallery and returned to her mansion and poured herself a whiskey she didn't drink, Thando stood in her home office looking at the city lights and acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding all evening. She wanted him, not abstractly, not as an idle fantasy or a momentary attraction that would fade with time. She wanted Siyanda and Dilavu with a hunger that terrified her, wanted to know what his hands would feel like on her skin, what sounds he would make if she kissed the hollow of his throat, what it would be like to be seen and desired by someone who didn't want her money or her connections or her influence. And he was engaged to her daughter. The universe, Thando thought, had a vicious sense of humor. Her phone rang, Naledi Kgosi, again. This time, Thando answered. "You've been avoiding me," Naledi said without preamble. Her voice was exactly as Thando remembered it. Low, authoritative, with an edge of amusement that suggested she found the world perpetually entertaining. "I've been busy." "You're always busy. It's one of the things I used to love about you. All that focus, all that drive. Do you remember what I used to say about your ambition?" Thando remembered everything about Naledi. The way she moved, the way she tasted, the way she could dismantle Thando's defenses with a single well-chosen word. But what she said was, "If this is about the Smart City contract, my team has submitted all the required documentation." "This isn't about the contract. Well, not directly. I want to see you, in person, tomorrow." "I'm in meetings all day tomorrow." "Cancel them." The presumption of it should have angered her. Instead, Thando felt something else. A stirring of the old dynamic between them, the way Naledi had always known how to provoke her, how to turn even a phone conversation into a contest of wills. "Why?" Thando asked. "Because I have something you need to hear, and because I miss looking at you when I tell you things you don't want to know." There was a pause. Then Naledi added more softly, "Please, Thando." The please did it. Naledi rarely asked for anything. And despite everything that had happened between them, despite the years of strategic opposition and carefully maintained distance, there had been a time when they had been each other's everything. "Where?" Thando asked. "Your wine estate, the one in Franschhoek, tomorrow at 2. That's a 2-hour drive from Johannesburg." "Then you'd better leave early." Naledi ended the call before Thando could respond. Thando stood there in the darkness of her office, glass of whiskey warming in her hand, and wondered how a single day could contain so many different kinds of desire. The forbidden want she felt for her daughter's fiancé. The complicated ache of old attraction for a woman who had once known her better than anyone. And underneath it all, the relentless hunger for success, for dominance, for the next deal and the next victory. She had built an empire on discipline, on the ability to sublimate every want into fuel for achievement. But lately, she had begun to suspect that all her success had been a way of avoiding the one question she couldn't answer. What did she want for herself, beyond the empire? If you've ever felt this kind of loneliness, the kind that comes from having everything except the one thing that matters, then follow this story, because what comes next will test every boundary Thando thought she understood. The drive to Franschhoek the next day was supposed to give Thando time to think. Instead, she spent most of it remembering. The estate had been one of her first major purchases after Sentinel Technologies went public. 300 hectares of the most beautiful land in the Western Cape, with a Cape Dutch manor house, extensive vineyards, and views that made even jaded billionaires stop and stare. She came here when she needed to think, or when the city became too much, or when she needed to remind herself that she had won. She had brought Naledi here once, early in their relationship, before either of them had fully understood what they were to each other. They had spent a weekend that Thando still remembered in vivid detail, drinking wine and talking until dawn and making love in every room of the manor house, with the kind of abandon that only comes from knowing, on some level, that it can't last. Naledi had said something that weekend that had haunted Thando ever since. They had been lying in bed, bodies still tangled together, and Naledi had traced patterns on Thando's skin and said, "You know what terrifies me about you? How easily you could love me if you let yourself, and how you never will because you've already decided that love is a luxury you can't afford." Thando hadn't denied it. She had simply pulled Naledi closer and kissed her until they both forgot what they'd been talking about. Now, pulling up to the manor house at 10 minutes before 2, Thando saw Naledi's car already parked in the circular drive. A Range Rover, black and sleek and expensive in the way that signaled power rather than wealth. Naledi had always understood the difference. She was standing on the veranda, and Thando felt her breath catch at the sight of her. 15 years had only made Naledi more striking. She was 50 now, tall and regal, with silver threading through her close-cropped hair and the kind of bone structure that would make her beautiful at any age. She wore white linen pants and a simple silk blouse, and she held a glass of wine that Thando recognized as coming from her own cellar. "You started without me," Thando said, climbing out of her car. "You're late." "I'm never late." "Which is why I started without you. I knew you'd arrive exactly on time, and I wanted you at a disadvantage." It was so perfectly Naledi that Thando almost smiled. Instead, she walked up the steps to the veranda and accepted the glass of wine that Naledi poured from the bottle she'd already opened. "To old friends," Naledi said, raising her glass. "We were never friends," Thando replied. "No, we were better than that, worse than that, both at once." They drank in silence, looking out over the vineyards. The afternoon sun turned everything golden, the kind of light that made the Cape look like something from a painting. In the distance, the mountains rose purple against the sky. "You didn't drive 2 hours to drink my wine," Thando said finally. "No, I came to warn you." "About what?" Naledi turned to face her fully. Her eyes were the color of dark amber, and they held an expression Thando couldn't quite read. "There's going to be an investigation into the Smart City contract. Allegations of bid rigging. Someone's claiming that you've been paying bribes to secure the deal." Thando felt ice slide down her spine. "That's absurd. Every part of our bid has been transparent and legal." "I know that. You know that. But the opposition party doesn't care about truth. They care about headlines. And they're planning to make you the centerpiece of their anti-corruption campaign in the lead-up to the elections." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I can make it go away. I have enough influence, enough connections. I can ensure that the investigation finds nothing, that the allegations are dismissed as political theater. Your contract will be safe. Your reputation will be intact." Thando studied her. "What do you want in return?" "Coffee," Naledi said. "Once a week. At that place in Melville we used to go to, just you and me talking." It was so unexpected that Thando actually laughed. "You want to blackmail me into having coffee with you?" "I want to see you again. Regularly. Without the pretense of business or politics or any of the armor we wear in public. I want an hour a week with the woman I used to know." "Why?" "Because I'm 50 years old and I'm tired of pretending that the best thing that ever happened to me didn't happen. Because I wake up some mornings and wonder what my life would have looked like if I'd fought harder for you, and because I think you wonder the same thing." The honesty of it was devastating. Naledi had always been able to do this, strip away all the strategy and maneuvering and just say the true thing. It was one of the reasons Thando had loved her, and one of the reasons she'd had to let her go. "I can't," Thando said quietly. "Can't or won't." "Both. You're a government minister. I'm bidding for a government contract. Coffee once a week would look like exactly the kind of corruption you're supposedly protecting me from. Then we'll be discreet." "Discreet doesn't exist for people like us. You know that." Naledi set down her wine glass with controlled precision. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Cool, professional, the voice she used in Parliament when she was about to destroy someone's argument. "Then let me be clearer. Withdraw from the smart city contract. Publicly cite concerns about the political climate, the investigation, whatever. Walk away and the investigation disappears. Stay in, and I will personally ensure that every questionable decision you've ever made gets scrutinized until something sticks." "You're threatening me." "I'm giving you a choice. Your empire or your pride. What will it be?" Thando felt fury rise in her chest, white-hot and clarifying. This was the Naledi she remembered too. The one who would burn down the world to get what she wanted. The one who had once told Thando that loving someone meant being willing to destroy them if they tried to leave. "You can't have me," Thando said, each word deliberate. "Not then, not now, not ever, and threatening my business won't change that." "I don't want to have you," Naledi said, and there was something raw in her voice now, something that cut through all the posturing. "I want to know you still exist. The woman I loved, not the corporation you've turned yourself into. 1 hour a week, Thando. That's all I'm asking." "By threatening to destroy everything I've built. By reminding you that you built it to avoid feeling anything real." They stared at each other. The air between them crackled with 15 years of unresolved history, of desire and rage and grief all tangled together. If Thando reached out now, if she touched Naledi's face the way she used to, everything would shift. The investigation, the contract, the carefully maintained distance between them, all of it would dissolve into the familiar gravity of their attraction. It would be so easy to fall back into that orbit. And it would destroy her. "Get out," Thando said. Naledi smiled, sad and knowing. "You have a week to decide. After that, the investigation moves forward." She left without another word, and Thando stood on the veranda of her beautiful estate, surrounded by everything she had accumulated, and felt more alone than she had in her entire life. She stayed at the estate that night, unable to face the drive back to Johannesburg. She drank too much wine and paced the empty rooms of the manor house and tried to think strategically about Naledi's ultimatum. The smart city contract was everything. Losing it would cost her company billions in projected revenue. More than that, it would signal weakness to her competitors, make her vulnerable to hostile takeover attempts, potentially trigger a cascade of canceled deals and lost confidence. She had built Sentinel Technologies into a powerhouse through ruthless focus and strategic dominance. Withdrawing from the contract would undermine everything. But Naledi's threat was real. A corruption investigation, even one that ultimately found nothing, would be devastating. The media would feast on it. Shareholders would panic. And in the court of public opinion, accusations mattered more than facts. She could fight it, hire the best lawyers, deploy her own media strategy, leverage her relationships with other politicians. But it would be costly and exhausting, and there were no guarantees. Or she could give Naledi what she wanted. 1 hour a week. Coffee and conversation with a woman who had once known her completely. The thought terrified her more than any business threat ever had. Her phone buzzed. A text from Zinl. "Siyanda and I are having dinner at our place tomorrow night. Come, just the three of us, please." Thando stared at the message. The universe's sense of humor was getting increasingly pointed. She texted back, "I'll be there." Then she poured herself another glass of wine and stood at the window looking out at the dark vineyards and wondered what would happen if she just let herself want things. If she stopped trying to control every variable and calculate every risk and simply allowed herself to feel. The thought lasted exactly as long as it took for her to remember what happened the last time she'd done that. The wreckage of her relationship with Naledi. The way vulnerability had turned into weapon. The months it had taken to rebuild herself into someone who couldn't be hurt that way again. No, discipline was what had saved her then. Discipline would save her now. She would find another way to deal with Naledi's threat. And she would ignore whatever this thing was with Siyanda until it faded into irrelevance. Simple, clean, controlled. But when she finally went to bed, she dreamed of hands on her skin and a voice saying her name like a prayer. And when she woke in the dark gasping, she couldn't tell if the hands belonged to Naledi or to Siyanda or to someone she hadn't even met yet. Comment below if you've ever had to choose between what you wanted and what you needed to survive, because Thando's about to learn that sometimes the choice makes itself. The dinner at Zinl and Siyanda's apartment in Parkhurst was supposed to be casual. Just the three of them, Zinl had said, something simple and relaxed. But when Thando arrived with a bottle of wine that cost more than most people's monthly rent, she could feel the tension in the air before anyone even spoke. Siyanda opened the door. He was barefoot, wearing jeans and a white t-shirt that should have made him look casual but instead only emphasized the lean muscle of his frame. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither of them moved. "Mrs. Mthembu," he said formally. "Thando," she corrected, as she always did, and watched something shift in his expression. "Thando," he repeated, as though testing how her name felt in his mouth. The intimacy of it, the way he said it, made her skin feel too tight. Zinl appeared behind him, radiant in a simple dress, and the moment broke. Thando hugged her daughter, praised the apartment, allowed herself to be led into the open-plan living space that had the kind of artful casualness that came from good taste and careful curation. "Siyanda cooked," Zinl announced. "He's been in the kitchen for hours." "I wanted to impress you," he said, and there was something in his tone that made it unclear whether he was talking to Zinl or to Thando. The meal was beautiful. Pan-seared linefish with a saffron reduction, roasted vegetables, a salad with ingredients Thando couldn't identify, but that tasted like summer. They ate on the balcony overlooking the tree-lined street, and Siyanda and Zinl talked about their wedding plans, while Thando tried not to notice how often Siyanda's eyes found hers. "We're thinking of having the ceremony at your estate in Franschhoek," Zinl said. "If that's okay with you, Mama, the vineyards would be such a perfect backdrop." Thando thought about Naledi standing on that same veranda, threatening her empire. She thought about the investigation that was coming, the choices she would have to make. "Of course," she said, "whatever you want." Zinl beamed. Then she excused herself to take a call from the wedding planner, leaving Thando and Siyanda alone on the balcony. The silence stretched. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm went off, then stopped. The evening air smelled like jasmine and the wine they'd been drinking. "You don't approve," Siyanda said finally. Thando looked at him. Of what? Of me, of this engagement. I can see it in the way you look at us. You're wrong. Am I? He leaned back in his chair, studying her. You've been polite all evening, complimentary, but you haven't smiled once. Not really. And I've learned that when you're polite and complimentary without smiling, it means you're analyzing a problem you don't yet know how to solve. The accuracy of his observation should have irritated her. Instead, she felt a thrill run through her body, the same dangerous recognition she'd felt at the gallery. You presume to know me very well for someone I've met 3 times, she said. I pay attention. It's what I do. Architecture is about understanding what people don't say as much as what they do. The space between intention and expression. You're very good at controlling what you express, but the space between tells a different story. And what story is that? He held her gaze. That you're lonely. That you've built something magnificent and powerful, and you're trapped inside it. That you wake up some mornings and wonder if any of it was worth the cost. Thando felt her breath catch. No one had ever said anything like that to her. Not Naledi, not her ex-husband, not anyone. And certainly not a man young enough to be her son who was engaged to her daughter. You're very perceptive, she said, keeping her voice level. And you're deflecting. What do you want me to say, Siyanda? I want you to tell me why you look at me the way you do. The question hung in the air between them. Thando could feel her heart racing, could feel the wine and the darkness and the jasmine-scented air conspiring to make her say something reckless. I don't know what you mean, she said. Yes, you do. Inside, they could hear Zinl laughing on the phone. The sound was bright and uncomplicated, and it reminded Thando of everything she stood to lose. I should go, she said, standing. Siyanda stood too, close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. I'm marrying your daughter because I love her, but I need you to know that I see you. The woman behind all the success and strategy, and she's extraordinary. Then Zinl came back out onto the balcony, still smiling from her phone call, and the moment shattered into something that could be denied, explained away, forgotten. But Thando knew she would never forget it. The way he had looked at her. The way he had said extraordinary like he meant it, like he could see all the parts of herself she kept hidden and wanted them anyway. She left soon after, pleading an early meeting. She drove home through the empty streets of Johannesburg, past the informal settlements and the luxury compounds, past all the evidence of inequality that her company claimed to be helping solve through technology and data. When she got home, she stood in her shower until the water ran cold, trying to wash away the feeling of Siyanda's eyes on her skin. It didn't work. The week that followed was a lesson in controlled chaos. The investigation into the Smart City contract was leaked to the press, exactly as Naledi had predicted. The headlines were brutal. Tech giant accused of corruption. Questions surround Mthembu's latest deal. Opposition demands transparency in Smart City bidding. Thando's lawyers crafted careful responses. Her PR team went into overdrive. Her shareholders demanded emergency meetings. And through it all, Naledi sent a single text message. Coffee on Saturday, you know where. Thando ignored it. Instead, she threw herself into work. 18-hour days, back-to-back meetings, strategic calls with every politician and business leader who owed her a favor. She would beat this investigation through sheer force of will and superior resources. She would prove that she didn't need Naledi's protection or anyone else's. On Thursday, Siyanda showed up at her office. Her assistant announced him with barely concealed surprise. "Mr. Nd Lavu to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." Thando should have sent him away. Instead, she heard herself say, "Send him in." He entered her office with the same quiet confidence he brought to everything. He looked around, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows with their view of Santon's skyline, the minimalist furniture, the single piece of art on the wall, an original William Kentridge worth more than most houses. "Impressive," he said. "Did Zinnel send you?" "No, she doesn't know I'm here." "Then why are you here?" He crossed to her desk, and she forced herself to stay seated, to not betray how her pulse had quickened the moment he walked in. "I wanted to see where you live," he said. "Not your house, this, the place where you're most yourself." "This is an office." "Exactly. You spend more time here than anywhere else. This is where you're comfortable, where you have control." He was right, and she hated how easily he saw through her. "Siyanda, you can't just show up at my office without an appointment. I have meetings." "Cancel them." The audacity of it should have offended her. Instead, she felt something else. A dangerous, thrilling surrender to the directness of his desire. Because that's what this was, desire. Not love, how could it be? But want, pure and undeniable. "I can't," she said. "Can't or won't?" It was the same question Naledi had asked, and Thando realized with sudden clarity that she was trapped between two different kinds of impossible wanting. Naledi, who knew her past and wanted to reclaim it, and Siyanda, who seemed to see her future and wanted to be part of it. "Both," she said. He nodded slowly. Then he said something that changed everything. "I think about you constantly. I know I shouldn't. I know it's wrong in every possible way. But when I'm with Zinnel, sometimes I catch myself wondering what you would say about something, how you would react. And I hate myself for it. But I can't stop." The honesty of it was like a physical blow. Thando felt her careful control starting to fracture. "You need to leave," she said. "I will, but first I need to know if I'm alone in this. Because if I am, I'll find a way to stop. I'll marry Zinnel and be the husband she deserves, and I'll never mention this again. But if I'm not alone..." "Don't," Thando said, her voice sharp. "Don't finish that sentence." "Why not?" "Because some things can't be unsaid. And once they're said, there's no going back." He studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, sad and knowing. "You've already answered my question." He left without another word, and Thando sat in her office looking out at the city she had conquered and felt more powerless than she had in her entire life. That night, she called Naledi. "I'll meet you for coffee," she said. "But not once a week, once a month, and we discuss business only. No personal history, no reminiscing. Those are my terms." There was a pause. Then Naledi said, "No." "What do you mean, no?" "I mean the offer has changed. The investigation is moving faster than I anticipated. The opposition has found witnesses willing to testify that you bribed officials. It doesn't matter that it's not true. It matters that it looks true." "So what do you want now?" "Dinner, tomorrow night. My place in Cape Town, just the two of us." "Absolutely not." "Then enjoy your trial by media. I hear it's quite the experience." Naledi ended the call, and Thando was left holding her phone, feeling the walls closing in from every direction. She could fight. She could hire investigators to discredit the witnesses, launch a counteroffensive against the opposition party, use every weapon in her considerable arsenal. But it would be ugly and expensive and consuming, and there was no guarantee of victory. Or she could give Naledi what she wanted. One dinner. Just the two of them in the privacy of Naledi's Cape Town home, where no one would see them and no one would know. What could happen in one dinner? Share this with someone who understands that sometimes the most dangerous negotiations are the ones we have with our own desire. The flight to Cape Town the next evening was supposed to give Thando time to prepare. Instead, she spent it remembering all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Naledi's house was in Clifton, perched on the mountainside with views of the ocean that made even jaded billionaires stop and stare. Thando had been there before, years ago, when they had both been different people. Or maybe they had been exactly the same people, just with fewer scars. Naledi answered the door herself. She was barefoot, wearing silk pants and a cashmere sweater, her hair down in a way that Thando had rarely seen. She looked younger like this, softer. "You came," Naledi said. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I hoped you would. That's different." The house was exactly as Thando remembered it. Minimalist, elegant, with the kind of careful curation that spoke of both wealth and taste. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the ocean, and the last light of sunset turned everything golden. "I'm not staying long," Thando said. "Then we shouldn't waste time." Naledi led her to the dining room, where a table had been set for two. Candles, flowers, wine already breathing in crystal decanters. It was intimate in a way that made Thando's skin prickle with awareness. "You cooked?" Thando asked, surprised. "I wanted to remind you that I'm capable of taking care of you, that I could have, if you'd let me." They sat, they ate. The food was beautiful. Naledi had always been an excellent cook, and the wine was perfect, and the conversation stayed carefully neutral for exactly 20 minutes before Naledi said, "Tell me about your daughter's fiancé." Thando felt her body go still. "What about him?" "Zinel brought him to a fundraiser last week. Introduced him to everyone. He's charming, intelligent, and he couldn't take his eyes off you whenever you were in the room." "You're imagining things." "I've spent 15 years watching you navigate rooms full of people. I know what it looks like when you're avoiding someone's attention. And I know what it looks like when someone is trying very hard to pretend they're not looking at you." Thando set down her wine glass with controlled precision. "If this is your idea of conversation, this is my idea of honesty, something we were never very good at when we were together. We played games instead, tested each other, competed, and it destroyed us." "We destroyed us." "Yes, we did, which is why I'm trying something different now. The truth, as uncomfortable as it is, you're attracted to your daughter's fiancé, and unless I'm very much mistaken, he's attracted to you, and you're terrified of what that means." Thando wanted to deny it. She wanted to stand up and leave and never speak to Naledi again. But the relief of being seen, of not having to pretend, was so overwhelming that she found herself saying, "It doesn't matter what I feel. Nothing can happen. Nothing will happen." "Why not?" "Because he's engaged to my daughter. Because it would destroy my relationship with Zinel. Because it's wrong in every way that matters." So was what we had. Wrong, I mean. Two black women trying to build empires in a country that had barely stopped being officially hostile to us existing. Loving each other when we were supposed to be competing. Choosing passion over strategy. It was all wrong, and it was the most right thing I've ever done. Naledi reached across the table and took Thando's hand. Her skin was warm, familiar in a way that made Thando's chest ache. "I'm not asking you to act on what you feel for him," Naledi said. "I'm asking you to stop punishing yourself for feeling it. Desire isn't a crime. It's not even a sin. It's just human. Since when do you care about my humanity? You threaten to destroy my company. Because it's the only language you speak anymore. Power and threats and strategic advantage. I've been trying to reach the woman underneath all that armor, and the only way to do it was to make you come here. To sit across from me and remember what it felt like when you allowed yourself to want things without calculating the cost. Thando pulled her hand away. What do you want from me, Naledi? Really? I want you to admit that you're miserable, that all your success hasn't made you happy, that you wake up alone in that mansion and wonder if you made the wrong choices. I never wonder that. Liar. They stared at each other across the table. The candles flickered. The ocean whispered against the rocks below, and Thando felt something inside her break, just a little, just enough to let the truth slip through. What if I am miserable? She said quietly. What difference does it make? I can't unmake the choices I've made. I can't unbuild the empire. I can't go back to being the woman I was before all this. No, but you can start being honest about what you want now. Not what you think you should want. Not what serves your strategic interests. What you actually, desperately want for yourself. I don't know what that is. Yes, you do. You've always known. You're just too afraid to reach for it. Naledi stood and came around the table. She knelt beside Thando's chair, and before Thando could stop her, she took her face in both hands. I loved you, Naledi said, her voice breaking. I loved you so much it scared me. And you loved me too, I know you did, but you couldn't let yourself have it. You had to choose, the empire or the love. And you chose the empire, and I've spent 15 years watching you build bigger and bigger monuments to that choice, and I can't do it anymore. I can't watch you destroy yourself with loneliness because you're too disciplined to admit you need someone. Thando felt tears on her face and realized with distant surprise that she was crying. She couldn't remember the last time she'd cried. I can't give you what you want, she whispered. Then give me this. One night. Just you and me and the truth. No games, no strategy. Just two women who used to love each other being honest about what they lost. It was the worst idea. It was playing with fire. It was every kind of reckless. Thando kissed her. It was like falling backward through time. Naledi's mouth was exactly as she remembered, soft and demanding at once. Her hands were in Thando's hair, and Thando was pulling her closer, and for a moment, nothing else existed except the desperate relief of being touched the way she had been starving to be touched. Then Thando's phone rang. They pulled apart, both breathing hard. Thando looked at the screen. Zinl. Reality crashed back in with devastating force. Thando stood up, putting distance between herself and Naledi, and answered the call. Mama, where are you? Siyanda and I wanted to invite you for brunch tomorrow. Thando's voice when she spoke was perfectly controlled. I'm in Cape Town. Business meeting. I'm not sure when I'll be back. Oh, okay. Well, call me when you're home. Love you. Love you too. She ended the call and looked at Naledi, who was still kneeling on the floor where Thando had left her. I have to go, Thando said. Of course you do. Naledi. Don't apologize or explain, just go. And think about what I said, about honesty, about what you really want. Thando left without another word. She drove to the airport in a kind of daze, caught the last flight back to Johannesburg, and arrived home in the early hours of the morning feeling like she'd been in a car accident. She had kissed Naledi. She had wanted to kiss Siyanda. She was 53 years old and she had built an empire, and she didn't know who she was anymore when she wasn't being the person everyone expected her to be. The investigation was still happening. The contract was still at risk. Zinl was still engaged to a man Thando couldn't stop thinking about. And Naledi was still out there, knowing exactly which buttons to push to make Thando's careful control crumble. If this story is making you feel something, anger, empathy, desire, judgment, then subscribe, because what happens next will force Thando to choose between everything she's built and everything she's denied herself. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of crisis management. The investigation intensified. Anonymous sources leaked damaging information to the press. Thando's company's stock price dropped 15%. Board members started making concerned phone calls. And through it all, Siyanda kept appearing. At Zinl's apartment when Thando stopped by to drop off some documents. At a restaurant where Thando was meeting a client. At a gallery opening that Thando only attended because refusing would have looked suspicious. Every time she saw him, the tension between them ratcheted higher. The awareness, the unspoken want, the way they were both trying so hard to pretend that nothing was happening that it became its own kind of intimacy. Until the night Zinl called crying, saying she and Siyanda had fought, that she needed her mother, and could Thando please come over. Thando arrived to find Zinl on the couch, red-eyed and miserable, and Siyanda standing by the window looking like he wanted to punch through the glass. "What happened?" Thando asked. "He says I don't really see him," Zinl said through tears. "That I'm in love with the idea of him but not the actual person. That I treat him like an accessory to my perfect life." Thando looked at Siyanda, who met her eyes with an expression of such raw frustration that she felt it in her chest. "And what do you say to that?" Thando asked him carefully. "I say I'm tired of being the person everyone thinks I should be. The charming fiancé, the successful architect, the man who's supposed to be grateful he's marrying into such an illustrious family. I'm tired of playing a role." "So what do you want to be instead?" Thando asked, and the question hung in the air between them with dangerous weight. Siyanda's jaw tightened. "I want to be with someone who sees me, really sees me, not what I represent or what I can provide, me." Zinl stood up, her face crumpling. "I do see you, I love you." "I know you do, but it's not enough, and I think we both know that." The silence that followed was devastating. Thando watched her daughter's world collapse and felt torn between maternal instinct and the terrible, shameful relief flooding through her body. "You're breaking up with me," Zinl said finally. "I think we need some space. Time to figure out if this is really what we both want." Zinl looked at her mother. "Did you know? Did he tell you he was unhappy?" Thando felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "No, we barely speak." It was technically true and completely dishonest at the same time. Zinl grabbed her bag. "I'm going to stay with them by tonight. I can't be here right now." She left without looking at either of them, and Thando stood in the apartment with her daughter's fiancé, ex-fiancé now, maybe, and felt the world narrow to just the two of them. "You should go too," Siyanda said. "I should make sure you're okay." "I'm not okay. I just destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I can't stop thinking about someone I can't have." He crossed the room until he was standing in front of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Tell me I'm wrong," he said. "Tell me this is all in my head. Tell me you don't feel this too, and I'll find a way to fix things with Zinl and never speak to you again." Thando knew she should lie. Every instinct of self-preservation, every calculation of risk and consequence told her to deny everything and walk away. Instead, she said, "You're not wrong." He kissed her. It was nothing like kissing Naledi. That had been a return to something familiar, a memory made flesh. This was new territory. Siyanda kissed like he designed buildings, with attention to structure and detail and the relationship between form and function. His hands framed her face, then slid into her hair. And Thando heard herself make a sound she didn't recognize. They broke apart, both breathing hard. "This is insane," Thando said. "I know. Zinl is my daughter. I know. If anyone finds out. I don't care. You should care. Your career, your reputation, everything you've built could be destroyed. Then it's destroyed. I've spent my whole life being careful and strategic and appropriate. And I'm tired. I'm so tired of wanting things and not taking them because I'm worried about what people will think." He kissed her again, and this time Thando kissed him back with all the hunger she'd been denying for months. Years. Decades. They stumbled backward toward the couch, hands fumbling with clothes, and Thando felt like she was drowning in sensation, and finally letting go of the control that had defined her entire life. Then her phone rang. They froze. Thando looked at the screen. Naledi. She answered it without thinking, her voice shaking. "What?" "Turn on the news. Channel 324. Now." Thando grabbed the remote with trembling hands and turned on the television. The news anchor was speaking over footage of Thando at various public events, and the headline read, "Tech mogul implicated in corruption scandal. Witnesses testify to bribes." "They've moved the investigation forward," Naledi said. "There's going to be a hearing, public testimony, media coverage. It starts Monday." "That's 3 days from now." "I know. I tried to stop it, but they outmaneuvered me. The opposition has enough votes to force this through. I'm sorry, Thando." "Sorry. You threatened to make this happen if I didn't give you what you wanted. And then I changed my mind. I tried to protect you, but I failed." Thando looked at Siyanda, who was watching her with concern, his shirt still half unbuttoned, his lips still swollen from kissing her. She thought about Zinl, heartbroken somewhere across the city. She thought about her empire, built over decades, potentially crumbling in days. "I have to go," she said to Naledi. "Wait, meet me tomorrow. I can help you prepare for the hearing. I know the opposition's strategy." "Why would you help me?" "Because despite everything, I don't want to see you destroyed. And because I love you enough to help you even when you can't love me back." Naledi ended the call, and Thando stood in the wreckage of her daughter's apartment, having just betrayed her child with the man her child loved, facing the potential destruction of everything she'd built, and felt strangely, terrifyingly free. "I should go," she said to Siyanda. "Stay." "I can't." "Then meet me tomorrow, somewhere private. We need to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. This was a mistake." "Was it?" He crossed to her, took her face in his hands again. "Because it felt like the first honest thing either of us has done in months." She pulled away from him, grabbed her bag, and left before she could change her mind. The drive home was a blur. When she got to her mansion, she poured herself whiskey and stood at the window looking out at Johannesburg's lights and tried to understand what she'd become. A woman who kissed her ex-lover while her daughter called for help. A woman who betrayed her child with her child's fiancé. A woman whose empire was crumbling and who couldn't seem to care enough to save it because all she could think about was how Siyanda's hands had felt in her hair. Her phone buzzed. A text from Zinl. "I need space from you two right now, Mama. I saw the way you looked at him. I'm not blind." Thando felt her blood turn to ice. Another text. I don't know what's happening between you two, but I know something is, and I can't talk to you until I figure out if I'm imagining it. Thando tried to call. Zinl didn't answer. She tried to text an explanation. Nothing she wrote made sense. How could she explain what she didn't understand herself? Like in Follow, if you've ever felt the moment when your life splits into before and after. Because Thando is about to learn that some choices can never be unmade. The hearing started on Monday morning in a government building in Pretoria, in a conference room that had been set up to accommodate media cameras and a panel of investigators. Thando arrived with her lawyers, dressed in a navy suit that projected authority and calm she didn't feel. Naledi was there too, seated at the panel table in her capacity as minister. Their eyes met across the room, and Thando saw something there that looked almost like regret. The opposition party's lead investigator was a man named Dumisani Zulu, a former prosecutor with a reputation for theatrics and a talent for making innocent things look sinister. He led Thando through 2 hours of questions about her company's bidding process, her relationships with various government officials, and a series of payments that he claimed were bribes, but were actually completely legitimate consulting fees. Thando answered every question with precision. Her lawyers objected at the right moments. And through it all, she was aware of the cameras broadcasting this to the nation, aware of her reputation being dissected in real time, aware that somewhere her daughter was watching this and wondering if her mother was a criminal. Then Dumisani Zulu said, "Mrs. Mthembu, I'd like to ask you about your relationship with Minister Kgosi." Thando felt her pulse spike. What about it? You were romantically involved 15 years ago, were you not? That's irrelevant to this investigation. Is it? Because I have testimony suggesting that Minister Kgosi has been using her influence to protect you from this very investigation. That you've been meeting privately. That your relationship is more than just professional. Naledi leaned forward. I object to this line of questioning. My personal history with Mrs. Mthembu is a matter of public record and has no bearing on the current allegations. Doesn't it? Dumisani smiled. If you're protecting her because of personal feelings, that's corruption too, just a different kind. The room erupted. Journalists started shouting questions. Thando's lawyers demanded a recess. And Naledi stood up, her face a mask of controlled fury, and said something that Thando would never forget. You want to talk about corruption? Let's talk about how you leaked sealed testimony to the press. Let's talk about how you've been coordinating with opposition party leadership to turn this investigation into a political witch hunt. Let's talk about how you've manufactured a scandal where none exists because you need a high-profile target to boost your party's polling numbers before the election. The room went silent. Naledi continued, her voice like ice. Mrs. Mthembu has submitted to every request for documentation. She has answered every question, and you have found nothing that suggests any wrongdoing. This investigation is over. You don't have the authority to end this investigation, Dumisani said. No, but I have the authority to launch an investigation into you, and I will if this continues. It was a power play of breathtaking audacity. Thando watched Naledi defend her, watched her risk her own political capital to protect her, and felt something shift inside her chest. The hearing ended in chaos. Thando's lawyers ushered her out through a side entrance, away from the media crush. But before she could get to her car, Naledi caught up with her. We need to talk, Naledi said. Not here. Then come to my hotel. I'm staying at the Saxon in Johannesburg tonight. Why would I do that? Because I just burned a significant amount of political capital to protect you. And you owe me an explanation about what's happening with your daughter's ex-fiancé. Thando felt the ground drop away beneath her feet. How did you? I have investigators on my staff who are very good at their jobs. And when I saw how Zinl looked at you at that fundraiser, I had them look into it. Siyanda and Dilavu broke off his engagement 2 weeks ago, and you've been seen together since then. At a restaurant, at a gallery, last week at his apartment where you stayed for 2 hours while Zinl was at a friend's house. Those investigators of yours should find better ways to spend their time. Probably, but I needed to know if you were in trouble. And you are, aren't you? You're falling for him. I'm not discussing this with you. Then just listen. That young man is going to destroy you if you're not careful. Not intentionally. I don't think he's cruel. But he's 29 years old and he doesn't understand the stakes. Your daughter hates you right now. The media is looking for any scandal they can find. And if they discover you're involved with the man who broke your daughter's heart, it won't matter that I got you through this hearing. They will crucify you. Is that your professional opinion or your personal one? Both. Naledi stepped closer. And Thando could smell her perfume, familiar and devastating. I'm asking you to be careful, Naledi said quietly. Not because I'm jealous, though I am, but because I know what it's like to want something so badly that you forget to protect yourself. And I don't want to watch you lose everything because of desire, even if that desire isn't for me. She left before Thando could respond, and Thando stood in the parking garage feeling like she'd been in a collision. Her phone buzzed. Siyanda, I need to see you. Thando stared at the message for a long time. Then she texted back, Where? His response came immediately. My studio, tonight, please. She should say no. She should go home and call Zinl and try to repair the damage. She should focus on her company, which was still reeling from the investigation even though the immediate threat had passed. Instead, she found herself driving to Maboneng, to the converted warehouse where Siyanda kept his architecture studio. He was waiting for her. The space was beautiful. High ceilings, exposed brick, models of buildings scattered across work tables. But Thando barely registered any of it. All she could see was him. Thank you for coming, he said. I can't stay long. I know, but I needed to see you, to explain. Explain what? Why I broke up with Zinl. She thinks it's because she wasn't enough, but that's not true. I broke up with her because I fell in love with someone else, and staying with her when I felt that way would have been cruelty. Don't, Thando said. Don't say it. Why not? We've already crossed every line that matters. Why not be honest? Because once you say it, I'll have to respond, and I don't know what I'll say. He crossed to her, and this time she didn't pull away when he took her hands. I love you, he said. I know it's impossible and inappropriate, and there's an age gap that makes it scandalous. I know your daughter will hate us both. I know it could ruin your reputation and mine, but I love you anyway, and I think you love me too. Thando felt tears on her face. You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking you to choose yourself for once, to choose what you want instead of what's strategic or appropriate or safe. What I want will destroy people. Zinl, your career, everything. Then let it be destroyed. I'd rather have you and nothing else than everything else without you. It was the most romantic and the most terrifying thing anyone had ever said to her. Thando kissed him, and this time there were no interruptions, no phone calls, no emergencies. Just the two of them in his studio, surrounded by models of buildings that hadn't been built yet, creating something that would probably destroy them both. Later, much later, when they were lying tangled together on the couch in his office, Thando's phone buzzed with a news alert. Minister Kgosi, accused of conflict of interest in tech mogul investigation. The article detailed Naledi's defense of Thando at the hearing, their past relationship, and speculation about current involvement. There were quotes from anonymous sources suggesting impropriety, calls for Naledi's resignation, threats of further investigations. Thando sat up, reading with growing horror. Naledi had sacrificed herself to protect Thando, and now she was being crucified for it. "What's wrong?" Siyanda asked. Thando showed him the article. He read it, his expression darkening. "This is because of you," he said, "because she was trying to protect you." "I know. You have to fix this." "I don't know how." Siyanda took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Then figure it out. Because if someone destroys themselves to save you and you don't even try to help them, then you're not the person I thought you were." His words were like a slap. Thando pulled away from him, got dressed, and left without another word. She drove through the night, mind racing. By the time she reached Naledi's hotel, it was past midnight. She called from the lobby. "I need to see you," Thando said. "It's late." "I know, please." There was a pause. Then Naledi gave her the room number. When Naledi opened the door, she looked exhausted. Still beautiful, but worn down in a way Thando had never seen before. "I'm sorry," Thando said immediately. "I'm sorry that you're paying for protecting me. I'm sorry I've been selfish. I'm sorry for all of it." "Come in," Naledi said. The hotel's suite was elegant and impersonal. They sat on opposite ends of the couch, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Naledi said, "I'll survive this. I've survived worse. But I need to know, was it worth it? Whatever you're doing with Siyanda, is it worth the cost?" "I don't know yet," Thando said honestly. "But I think I had to find out. I've spent my whole life being disciplined and strategic and controlled. And I realized I don't know who I am when I'm not those things." "So you're using him to find yourself?" "No, I'm using him to remember what it feels like to want something without calculating the return on investment first." Naledi smiled sadly. "I tried to teach you that once. You weren't ready to learn." "I know, and I'm sorry for that too." "Don't be. We were who we were, and maybe who we needed to be at the time." Naledi leaned forward. "But Thando, you need to be smarter about this. If you're going to pursue this thing with Siyanda, you need to do it in a way that doesn't destroy everyone around you. Talk to Zinel. Be honest with her. She deserves that much." "She'll hate me." "Maybe, or maybe she'll understand, but you won't know unless you try." Thando left the hotel feeling like she'd been given a map to navigate impossible terrain. The next morning, she called Zinel. "Can we meet?" Thando asked. "I need to talk to you." The silence on the other end was so long that Thando thought Zinel had hung up. Then, "Okay, the coffee shop in Melville, tomorrow morning." Thando spent the next 24 hours preparing what she would say. But when she actually sat across from her daughter in the coffee shop, the same one where Naledi had wanted to meet for weekly conversations, all her prepared speeches evaporated. "I fell in love with Siyanda," she said simply. "Not on purpose, not by design, but it happened. And I need you to know that he didn't pursue me. If anything, I pursued him. He tried to make it work with you, he really did, but he couldn't because of what he felt for me." Zinel's face was unreadable. "When did it start?" "The first time I met him, that dinner when you brought him home. There was something between us, a recognition. I tried to ignore it, We both did, but it didn't go away. Did you sleep with him while we were still engaged? No, I kissed him once, the night you two fought, but nothing else happened until after. It was mostly true. Thando had learned that sometimes honesty required careful editing. Zinl sat back in her chair, and Thando could see her daughter processing this information, could see the hurt and anger and confusion playing across her face. I should hate you, Zinl said finally. You probably should. But I don't. Or I do, but I also understand. Because I saw it too. The way he looked at you. And if I'm being honest, I always knew he didn't love me the way I loved him. I just didn't want to admit it. I'm so sorry, baby. Don't call me that right now. I can't. I need time to process this. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If you're going to be with him all the way. Don't hide it. Don't make it a scandal. Own it. Because if you're going to break my heart over this, at least have the courage to stand by the choice. It was more grace than Thando deserved. She reached across the table and took her daughter's hand, and Zinl didn't pull away. I'll try, Thando said. That's all I'm asking. Comment below if you believe people can change, or if we're all just better and worse versions of who we've always been. Because Thando is about to test that question in ways that will surprise everyone. The scandal broke 3 weeks later. A tabloid published photos of Thando and Siyanda at a restaurant in Cape Town. They weren't doing anything particularly scandalous, just talking, leaning close across the table, but the context was enough. Tech billionaire dating daughter's ex-fiancé, the headline screamed. Age gap romance rocks elite circles. Within hours, it was everywhere. Social media erupted. Think pieces appeared analyzing everything from age gaps to power imbalances to family dynamics. Some people defended Thando's right to pursue happiness. Others condemned her as selfish and cruel. And through it all, the photos circulated over and over, evidence of desire that could no longer be denied. Thando's phone didn't stop ringing. Her PR team wanted crisis management sessions. Board members wanted reassurance that this wouldn't affect the company. Journalists wanted comments. She ignored all of them and went to find Siyanda. He was at his studio, and when he saw her, his face showed everything: relief, fear, love, concern. I'm sorry, he said immediately. I should have been more careful, I should have. She kissed him to stop the apology. No more hiding, she said when they broke apart. Zinl told me to own this if we're going to do it, so that's what we're doing. Your reputation. We'll survive, or it won't, but I'm done sacrificing what I want for what other people think I should want. That evening, Thando posted a statement on her social media. It was brief, honest, and unapologetic. I've fallen in love with someone unexpected. Yes, there's an age gap. Yes, he was engaged to my daughter. Yes, it's complicated and messy and probably inadvisable. But it's also real and honest, and the first time in a very long time that I've chosen something for myself rather than for my empire. I don't expect everyone to understand or approve, but I'm asking for the same grace I try to extend to others when they make choices that don't fit neat categories. The response was immediate and divided, but through it all, there was a thread of grudging respect. At least she was being honest. At least she wasn't hiding. Naledi called her that night. That was brave, she said. Or stupid. Both, probably, but I'm proud of you anyway. I cost you your position, didn't I? The investigation into your conflict of interest. They're calling for my resignation, yes, but I'm not giving it to them. I'm going to fight, and I'm going to win. Because unlike you, I've spent the last 15 years building political alliances instead of just business ones. I'm sorry, Naledi. Don't be. This isn't your fault. This is politics. And I'm very good at politics. There was a pause. Then Naledi said more softly, "Are you happy?" Thando thought about it. About Siyanda and the way he made her laugh. About how he challenged her and saw through her and wanted her anyway. About how terrifying and exhilarating it was to want someone this much. "I'm getting there," she said. "Good. That's all I ever wanted for you, even when I hated you for not choosing me." They talked for another hour, about nothing important, and when they finally hung up, Thando felt lighter than she had in months. The smart city contract was awarded to a competitor. The board of Sentinel Technologies expressed concern about Thando's recent publicity. Her stock portfolio took a hit, and Zinl stopped speaking to her again just when Thando had thought they might rebuild. But Siyanda was there. Every morning, every evening, a steady presence in her life that asked for nothing except honesty. 6 months after the scandal broke, they were at her estate in Franschhoek, the same estate where Naledi had once threatened her, where Zinl had wanted to have her wedding. They were sitting on the veranda watching the sunset turn the vineyards gold when Siyanda said, "I've been offered a fellowship in Copenhagen, a year-long position designing sustainable housing." Thando felt her chest tighten. "When do you leave?" "I haven't accepted yet. I wanted to talk to you first." "Why?" "Because I want you to come with me." She stared at him. "To Copenhagen." "Why not? Your company runs itself. You have executives who could manage things for a year, and I think you need to step away. From Johannesburg, from the scandal, from all of it. Come with me. Let's see what we are when we're not fighting everyone else's opinions." It was insane. It was impractical. It would mean leaving everything she'd built, even temporarily. "Okay," Thando heard herself say. Siyanda's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really, on one condition." "What?" "We take Zinl with us, if she'll come. I want her to see that this isn't about choosing you over her. It's about choosing a different kind of life, and maybe she needs that too." Subscribe if you believe in second chances, because what Thando is about to learn is that sometimes the empire you build is exactly the cage you need to escape. Zinl didn't come to Copenhagen, but she did call before they left, and what she said was, "I don't forgive you yet, Mama, but I'm trying to understand, and maybe distance will help with that." It was enough. Copenhagen was cold and beautiful and nothing like Johannesburg. Siyanda threw himself into his fellowship, designing housing that was sustainable and elegant and humane. And Thando, for the first time in her adult life, had nothing to do except exist. It was terrifying at first. Without meetings and deals and strategic planning, she didn't know who she was. She wandered the city, explored museums, learned to make Danish pastries that never turned out quite right. She video-called with her executives and resisted the urge to micromanage. She let Sentinel Technologies run without her constant oversight and discovered that it ran just fine. And she fell deeper in love with Siyanda. Not the dramatic, desperate love of their first months together, but something steadier, more sustainable, built on the daily intimacy of shared breakfasts and long walks and conversations that went nowhere and everywhere at once. 3 months into their Copenhagen adventure, Naledi visited. She had survived the scandal, survived the calls for her resignation, and she had emerged stronger, with a reputation for fighting for what she believed in even when it cost her. They met at a cafe in Nijhaven, surrounded by tourists and colored buildings reflected in the canal. You look different, Naledi said. Different how? Lighter, less like you're carrying the weight of the world. I let some of it go. I can see that. They talked for hours about politics and business and everything they'd lost and found. And at the end, Naledi said something that Thando would carry with her forever. I used to think you choosing the empire over me meant you didn't love me enough, but I understand now. You weren't choosing the empire. You were choosing survival, because you didn't know yet that you could have both success and love and all the messy human things that make life worth living. I hope Siyanda teaches you what I couldn't. What's that? That you deserve to be happy, not successful, not powerful, just happy. Share this story if you've ever had to unlearn everything you thought you knew about success. Thando and Siyanda returned to Johannesburg after a year. They returned to a city that had mostly moved on to new scandals, new dramas. Zinel met them at the airport, and while the hug she gave her mother was brief, it was genuine. I'm seeing someone, Zinel said in the car. A woman, she's a lawyer, very smart, very intimidating. Thando felt her heart swell. I'd love to meet her. You will, but slowly. We're taking things slowly. They drove through the city Thando had once dominated, and she felt like a tourist in her own life. Sentinel Technologies had thrived without her constant control. The new CEO, her former COO, had navigated several crises and emerged stronger. The company's stock price was at an all-time high. Thando could have felt diminished by this, could have felt like proof that she was dispensable. Instead, she felt freed. She stepped down as CEO officially and took a position on the board. She sold the Westcliff mansion and moved into something smaller, more human-scaled with Siyanda. They fought sometimes about money and power dynamics and the age gap that would never fully disappear. But they also laughed. They built a life that was theirs, not a performance for anyone else. Naledi won her next election by a landslide. She implemented the Smart City project with a different vendor, but consulted with Thando on the technology. They became friends in a way they'd never been before, friends without the weight of what they'd once been to each other. And one evening, 3 years after the scandal first broke, Thando stood on the veranda of her Franschhoek estate, which she'd kept because some things were worth holding onto, and watched Siyanda play with their daughter. Not biologically theirs. They'd fostered her from an orphanage, a little girl named Amal who was 5 and brilliant and stubborn. Adoption was pending. And watching Siyanda swing her around while she shrieked with laughter, Thando felt something she'd never expected to feel. Complete. Not because she had a partner or a child or any of the traditional markers of feminine success, but because she had chosen a life that was messy and complicated and occasionally scandalous, and she had chosen it knowing the costs and decided the rewards were worth it. Her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. Thando Mthembu, a voice said. Yes. This is Saifo Madansela from Forbes Africa. We're doing a feature on women who have redefined success on their own terms. We'd love to interview you. Thando looked at Siyanda and Amal, at the vineyard stretching out in golden rows. At the life she'd built from the wreckage of the empire she'd once thought defined her. I'd like that, she said. The interview ran 3 months later with a cover photo of Thando not in a boardroom or at a political event, but in her kitchen, flour on her hands from teaching Amal to make bread, Siyanda in the background laughing at something. The headline read, Thando Mthembu, the billionaire who learned that power means nothing without love. It was reductive, maybe, oversimplified, but it was also, in its way, true. And when Thando read it, curled up on the couch with Siyanda sleeping beside her and Amal's hand clutched in hers, she didn't feel diminished or exposed. She felt seen. Finally, fully seen. Not as the empire, not as the scandal, but as the woman underneath it all, who had wanted and lost and wanted again, and who had finally learned that the bravest thing she could do was let herself be loved. If this story changed something in you, if it made you think about the empires you've built and the love you've denied yourself, then follow for more stories about the complicated, messy, beautiful ways we learn to be human. Because in the end, that's the only story that matters. The one where we stop pretending we're invincible and start admitting we're just people, desperate to be known and loved and chosen, again and again, by someone who sees us clearly and wants us anyway.